my name is Denise Vanderveen, and I'm the board chair for BFO South Central Region. Welcome to our 15th annual and first ever virtual Butterfly Release Memorial. I want to start by thanking our Executive Director, Krista, for her leadership and all the volunteers who have dedicated their time to ensuring we can continue to support our community in the unique times we're all experiencing. I feel so blessed to be a part of such an incredible organization with equally incredible people. I'm also very grateful to be with all of you today to remember our loved ones. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Christine Yanke, and I am honored and blessed and excited to have been asked to be a presenter for this particular event. So thank you for having me and giving me an opportunity to share my story. Right now, you may be finding it difficult to have strength and embrace life after a loss, and it probably seems impossible. However, once you choose hope, anything is possible. And so I'd like to share my story with you if that's okay. In 2001, my life was turned upside down after a traumatic police raid in my home and subsequent arrest of my husband. As a stay-at-home mom of 10 years, I was left with the aftermath of this event, which meant finding a job, but most importantly, taking care of my 3 young sons for myself. My life was in an upheaval while my husband awaited trial. I was running in all directions for him, for the boys, and trying to work 3 jobs so that I didn't lose my home. I was pleasing everyone else, and I had no opportunity to actually sit with myself and to accept what was really going on, and I was just in survival mode. 3 long years later, when I was at my husband's trial in another province, my mom died suddenly of a brain aneurysm while babysitting my boys. That day, as the court proceedings came to a close, I jumped in my car and I headed out on my 7-hour drive. When I was about 4 hours from home, I called my mom to see how the boys were and tell her where I was. She said she was tired. Of course she was tired. She was watching my 3 boys. But as she always would say is, that's okay. Just, when you get here, just wake me up. I want to hear everything that happened and be there for you. So she insisted that I wake her when I arrived home that night. But when I got home, my dad was actually waiting up for me. He was a bit of a worrywart, so he had had some drinks, and he was just waiting patiently for me to get there just to make sure that I was home and safe. When I got there, he told me that my mom said that she just wasn't feeling well, so she decided to go to bed right after I called her. He told me that he could hear her for a bit, and she was calling my youngest son. But my dad told her that he was playing outside, and so then she just must have dozed off. I shared the updates with him, and he proceeded to join my mom in bed after a little while. Not even a few minutes went by, and he was back in the room with me, and he had terror on his face. And I said, "Is something wrong, Dad?" And he said, "Something is wrong with your mom." And of course, since he had been drinking, I thought that he must be overreacting or something. So I got up and I went into the bedroom to check for myself. And I could hear her, but she just wasn't waking up. So I started calling her softly and shaking her softly. And when she didn't respond, I started really shaking her, and she still didn't respond. At that moment, my heart just started pounding, and I flew into the other room to call 911. The ambulance arrived, and they worked on her for a bit, and then they decided to take her into the hospital. I thought maybe she had had a heart attack, and because they said nothing, I truly thought she was going to be okay. In fact, I just told my dad, "Go in the ambulance, it's okay. I'm going to, get the boys off to school, and then I'll come down there and join you." And that's how sure I felt that everything was going to be okay. After about 5 hours, I was sitting in a common room at the hospital with about 20 family members waiting for the doctor to update us. He entered the room and he informed us that the blood clot was just too much, and even if they operated on her, she probably would either remain in a coma or she ultimately would die. The first thing that I remember, and the thing that I still remember to this day, is the piercing cry of my grandmother, her mother. It's something that I'll never forget, and I was in shock myself by the words of the doctor. How could this be? I just couldn't understand how could this happen. Everybody in the room at this point had completely fallen apart, and everyone was now sobbing. As the reality sank in, I became hysterical. My mom was only 62 years old, and over the years, her and I would talk about it and say that we both couldn't imagine losing each other, and we agreed that we didn't know how we would carry on. She was my best friend, and over the last 3 years, she had been my rock. My life was complicated, and she was always there. She always picked me up when I was crashing. All that was playing in my head, though, was all the things that I didn't say, all the things that we didn't get a chance to talk about, and all the things we didn't do together. And I just wanted her back for even one more day. I immediately felt so guilty. First, I couldn't believe that I didn't come right to the hospital, and then I just started thinking of all the times I disappointed her. I would call her intoxicated when I was having a bad day, and she would just cry her heart out on the other end. And I thought, what kind of a daughter had I been? I made it through her funeral, but really didn't remember it. I was numbed with alcohol and drugs, and it didn't stop there. When I was sober, I was so sad I could barely get it through the day, and on some days I didn't even get out of bed, and when I did, I was overwhelmed with anxiety. I was hiding from the boys so they didn't see my pain, and I became an avoidance expert. I deflected everything so that I didn't have to deal with it, and I didn't have to feel anything. My father was devastated, and he could barely function. He was also drowning in alcohol to heal his pain, and I vowed to keep an eye on him for my mom. He would travel down in the middle of the night from his place that was a few hours away, intoxicated, and bang on my door, and I would get really upset with him, but I knew that I had to just take care of him. I knew that he needed me. My mom was now gone about 6 months, and I had to watch my husband get sentenced to 20 years in prison. I couldn't deal with any of that, and I just kept reaching for the wrong coping strategy, alcohol and drugs. And at this point, it was even some antidepressants, and just continued to sink deeper into depression. I would drink and do drugs all night long with my boys, or all night long while my boys were sleeping, and sleep all day when they went to school. I wasn't ready to feel anything, and I was completely broken. Night after night, I would cry and apologize to my mom. And then thankfully one night, it was like she was right beside me. As I sobbed, I heard, "Christine, you have to take care of these boys. I know you can do it. They need you." Thankfully, that was a big turning point in my life, that I needed to give myself permission to move forward without her. Within a few months, I voluntarily went to detox and then to treatment and sold my house that was literally sucking my soul, and I got a new job. Grief comes in two parts. The first is loss, and the second is rebuilding your life. And it is okay to move on, so I learned. I was extremely excited to start my sober life, but one thing that they didn't teach you in rehab is how to go out there and live in real life. It was inevitable that there would be a loss, many losses, I'm sure, small ones and big ones, and more pain and more obstacles to push through. But I felt confident that I would do everything in my power to surround myself with good people, create new healthy rituals, and begin living the life that I deserved. It had just been about 6 years after my mom passed away, and it was a Sunday night, and I received a call from my brother. I had two brothers. This brother was standing outside of my dad's home, and he had a gut feeling that something might be wrong, which why he thought that was because he hadn't received a call back from my dad in about a week, and either had I. And so his gut told him to check on him. And my dad lived about 2.5 hours from us, so he was really stubborn. And we would always try, my brothers and I would always try to get him to come down for the winters and live with any of us. And he just refused. He just liked to be there by himself. And he lived in a small community where sometimes days would go by and he wouldn't even see anybody. So on the phone, my brother just didn't sound right, and I couldn't even understand what he was saying, but I knew that it was something terrible. He just didn't make sense. And so I handed the phone to my Kamara husband, and I just immediately dropped to my knees on the floor. When he got off the phone, he said that something terrible had happened and that we needed to go there. We needed to get in the car and we needed to drive to my dad's. So I called my other brother and he joined me for the ride up, not even knowing what we were going to expect when we got there. When we got there, my brother was still standing in front of the window looking in the living room at my dad's place, and now there was police everywhere. My father had taken his life and he had shot himself. I couldn't fathom how something like this could happen. I was just in complete disbelief. He was only 72, and I know he had never been the same. And I already started thinking, oh my gosh, what did I miss? What happened here? Why would he want to leave us? I just was overcome with the questions and trying to understand. And then I just started to really think about it, that he wasn't the same since my mom died, and I really believed at that moment that he died of a broken heart. But I was angry. I didn't know why he would want to leave my brothers and my kids behind, all the grandkids. And I just wondered, how could something, again, tragic happen again to my family? What had saddened us the most is that none of us had any idea how long he had been there, and we found out that he had been there for 8 days. And all I could think about is I was celebrating and living my life for the last 8 days, and he was sitting here by himself, and he was gone. And I felt extreme guilt over that, and thought how much that I could have helped him. I am grateful that I had gotten help when my mom died, because I don't think that I would have survived this. I didn't turn to drugs or alcohol. Instead, I just completely avoided feeling or talking about it and just dealing with it at all. I jumped back into keeping myself busy and pushing the sadness away. And I told myself that if I moved on, that it meant I was over it, and how could I ever stop thinking about my parents? This was a really huge obstacle for me. Thankfully, a few months later, prior to my dad's passing, I had stepped onto my first yoga mat in my first yoga class. I hadn't done many, but I knew that something incredible happened when I was on that mat. Within the year following my dad's death, I decided to immerse myself in a 200 yoga teacher training program and become a yoga teacher. And then slowly just start to heal, allow myself to heal. I could feel my transformation beginning. There was a shift. Instead of focusing on what I had lost, I began focusing on what I had, and I began learning the practice of gratitude. A few years later, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and generalized anxiety disorder, and I knew it was time. I knew it was time to go all in, and I decided to go full force into cognitive behavioral therapy and heal the pain that I had been avoiding for years. I was really tired of being tired, and I didn't stop there because I was experiencing extreme physical pain from the effects of post-traumatic stress disorder. I was battling restless legs and chronic pain in my back and my hips, and I was becoming extremely frustrated. So one night I decided to Google yoga and trauma, and I found a yoga training geared towards those who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder and trauma. It was new, and it was only in the US, and I thought, how amazing would this be? I didn't have any savings. I was really just making ends meet, so I didn't know how I would be able to go. But I remembered that I had put some inheritance tucked away, and it was called the For Me Someday. And I thought, I wonder how amazing this would be if I took that money and I enrolled myself in this training, and that I would always remember that my parents were the ones that helped me through this. So that's what I did. I enrolled in the training, and I flew to the US. I completed it, and I became the first person in Canada to graduate from this training. This was life-changing for me. My physical pain was gone, and I knew that if this could impact my life like this, then I wanted to share this with others. So without hesitation, I began to book workshops in my community and educate others and show them my newfound discovery. It wasn't easy talking about my life and telling people about my story, but I immediately noticed the impact it was having. My voice would crack, but tears would run down people's faces, and there were nods of confirmation. They were seeing themselves in me. I was inspiring them and giving them hope that they were going to be okay. Over the last 7 years, I have spoke at conferences and universities and hospitals on resilience. I also decided that I wanted to give back, to volunteer. I wanted to teach these trauma-informed yoga classes to women. So when I looked at the list of volunteer facilities, smack in the middle of it was a place called Womankind Addiction Services right here in Hamilton. I had done my rehab there 8 years prior, and I knew that these women needed it very much. For the last 6 years, I have been part of the women's treatment program there. I get to welcome 12 new women. I sit with them, I share my story, and every 5 weeks, another up to 12 people come in, women come in, and I get to take them through 14 of these yoga classes that are geared towards trauma and PTSD. In addition, we were able to do clinical research to show the benefits of this specialty yoga in women in addiction, and right before my eyes, I could see the true power of helping these women heal and to see how this could help them move forward in their lives. Had you asked me in 2005 where I would be today, first, I wouldn't have ever imagined that I would be completely happy and fulfilled. I certainly wouldn't have thought that I would be sharing my story, and in doing so, inspiring other people and giving them hope and giving them the permission to free themselves, to encourage them to know that by opening up and talking about your loss, you would find other people going through the same thing. And lastly, that I certainly wouldn't have imagined that I would still be sober 15 years later. I feel so blessed. to have gone through this journey. I cannot bring either of my parents back, but I can now celebrate the beautiful memories we had together. I know that they are watching over me, and I am making them proud. Here is what I know for sure. There is no right or wrong way to grieve. However, the better your understanding of grief and how it is healed, the better equipped you'll be to help yourself and then others. Feelings of guilt and anger and despair and fear are all common. Don't be afraid to ask for help. There is no set timetable for grieving. Let yourself feel your emotions. And when you're ready, take one step at a time. I want to thank you for listening, and I'd like to wish you much luck and love and hope. Thank you.
Welcome everyone to the 15th Annual Butterfly Release Memorial, brought to you by Bereaved Families of Ontario. It's a day I look forward to every year. It's such a beautiful event. I hope you enjoy. My name is Bunny MacFarlane. I am a previous recipient of BFO services in that I joined a facilitated mums group shortly after our son died. I found everything I needed at that group. I found compassion, understanding, unlimited resources, love, and hope. I was able to leave that group understanding that I may be able to get beyond the pain that I was experiencing. I was so inspired, I went on to take the facilitator training and facilitated several mums groups, which was such a joy to me. I've been asked to share my story today, and I'm hoping that it will give you some nuggets of information that you can use. I am one who talks about storytelling and believe strongly in the power of story, and specifically its ability to keep our loved one alive. So let me share with you, in collaboration with the wonder and the magic and the beauty and the awe of the butterflies that you will see today, the wonder and miracle of our boy, our Bryce Alexander Stewart MacFarlane. So if we begin early in Bryce's life, I am going to share with you from the beginning a little part of his story and mine. When I was 20 weeks into my term, I began labor, I began contracting, and was given medication to halt the contractions, which my body did not agree with. So the doctors proceeded to offer me, which I was not aware of the implications, but I was put on an alcohol drip at that time. It wasn't known the effects of alcohol on a fetus. So for the next 3 days, I was completely inebriated. I don't remember that time. However, we were able to stop the contractions and I was able to go on with my pregnancy. If we move forward to 8 weeks prior to my due date, I began contracting again. My water broke. And at the hospital, the doctors agreed that they would not try and halt the contractions again, that they would allow me to proceed, even though it was a risky time for Bryce to be born. However, he came into this world not breathing, and was transferred immediately to the NICU at McMaster. I didn't see him until the next day, and I was aghast when I walked into the NICU to see my little baby in the corner in his incubator with being intubated and trying to breathe. But what was so spectacular and wondrous about him is that he was the giant in the NICU. He was 6 pounds, 8 ounces when he was born, and compared to all others in the NICU, he was a giant. So began his wondrous journey. I brought him home a week later, and he was such a joy. The consequences of the alcohol drip were soon known. When Bryce attended school, he was identified as gifted. He was really very intelligent, but he was learning disabled, so he was challenged in that way, and that caused him an identity crisis. He didn't really fit in with the gifted kids. He didn't really fit in with the learning disabled kids, and the teachers did not understand his, I guess you could call it a diagnosis. They did not understand how to teach him. However, at home, he was fragile. He was afraid of many, many things. Heights, water, being separated. So it was a bit of a struggle for him. But overall, he was a happy, happy little boy and grew to be an amazing young man. So if we fast forward to his 18th birthday, Bryce asked if he could go skydiving for his 18th birthday. That shocked me out of my chair, and I had no idea the impact that that day was going to have on his life and mine. But he proceeded with jumping out of a plane and for his 18th birthday, and the magic happened for him. He fell in love with skydiving, but coinciding with that time in his life, he also fell in love with photography. He was in a photography program that allowed him to do commercial photography. So the interesting thing and the wondrous thing about Bryce is that he married the two. He married his love of photography and his joy of jumping out of planes, believe it or not, and became a videographer. So he would, on weekends, jump out of planes and video individuals who were taking their first jump or who wanted a video recording of their skydive. It was an interesting and magical time for him, though. He found his joy, and he was able to do this for the next 9 years. His commercial photography in and of itself allowed him to travel. He went to India and China for his work, and then was videoing people skydiving on weekends. He had a good life. He was loving flying through the clouds. It was such a joy to see him so happy. So then we move forward to 1 month after his 27th birthday. He turned 27 on the 4th of June. On the 4th of July, we got the call that would change our lives forever. St. Michael's phoned and said that Bryce had been in an accident and we needed to come to see him, to be with him. Now, Bryce had hurt himself skydiving probably 4-5 months prior to this, and was on crutches for a month, So we likened that phone call to that sort of event. Oh no, we hurt his leg again. Something bad happened. We don't know, but we've been called. So we went. On the way to the hospital, the chief neurosurgeon at St. Michael's called and said, your son's brain is swelling. We need to release the pressure. Do I have your permission to operate? And of course, I said, do whatever you need to do to make my son comfortable. So we arrived at the hospital to meet a young resident who was trying to explain to us what was happening, that he was in surgery. And then the neurosurgeon came to the door and said to the resident, did you tell them? And he said no. So the neurosurgeon proceeded to tell us that Bryce had been skateboarding and hit his head. The damage was almost immediate. He had one pupil blown prior to surgery, and during the surgery to release the pressure on his brain, his second pupil went as well. So our question was, is there hope? And he instantly said no. So we struggled with that immediately. What do you mean there's no hope? That can't be. He was fine this morning. How can that be? So we went and saw him lying in the bed with tubes attached and a ventilator, bandages everywhere. It was painful to see. So we had some decisions to make. What to do next. And we were told that Bryce was brain dead. That was the term that they used. However, he was not spinal stem dead. So we had to wait. We had to wait for his brain stem to die. And that took us to the 6th of July. But in the meantime, we thought long and hard about what to do with the possibility of Bryce being such an amazing young man and how we could make a difference in someone else's life. So we met with the transplant team, went through an excruciating question and answer period about Bryce's lifestyle, which was pretty difficult. But he was accepted as a donor, and on the 6th of July, St. Michael's harvested his organs and donated to 6 people to keep them alive. Talk about magical and wondrous and miraculous. We were in such shock. We didn't feel that wonder. We just knew it was something he would have wanted. So we said goodbye, and they took Bryce. We went on with our really horrific task of planning a funeral, writing obituaries, choosing caskets, which no mother should ever have to do. And that brings us to the 9th of July, the day of the funeral. So the morning of the day of the funeral, my eldest daughter calls and says, "Mom, my water broke. I'm in labor. I can't come to the funeral. I'm going to have a baby." So we went to the hospital to see her. and then went on to the funeral. At 11:10, they began the service, and we endured family participation, which was lovely. But when it was over, it was a beautiful hot day. Outside the church, we stood and greeted the people who had come to say goodbye to Bryce, his friends, his co-workers, his family. And all of a sudden, my grandson, my eldest grandson, Drew, came over and said, "Nanny, Mom had the baby. It's a boy." So, in that environment, standing outside, surrounded by people who loved him, I looked for my nephew, the biggest person I know, and said, "Jason, please tell everybody it's a boy." So Jason announced baby's arrival, and everyone started cheering and clapping. It was the most surreal moment of my life, because I was saying goodbye to my son, and we were congratulating the entrance of my grandson into our lives. So we said goodbye to Bryce, and the hearse left. And I forgot to mention, I need to mention to you, July 9th is my birthday as well. So we went on to the rehearsal, and it was, as I said, a beautiful hot day, but we got to the rehearsal, and my husband and I opened the windows just for a minute to get a breath of fresh air. And this beautiful yellow butterfly flew in my window, flew around in the car and out my husband's window. And of course, we knew that was the first sign from Bryce saying, "It's okay, Mom. It's okay." So we went on to the rehearsal, and I keep calling it the rehearsal. I don't think it's called the rehearsal. The get together after the funeral. And the phone rings. I'm told that there's a phone call for me. I get on the phone with my daughter, and she said, "Mom, the nurses said they can clean me up and I can come to be with you all." And I said, "No, it's okay, sweetie. We're almost done here. You stay there with the baby. We'll come to you." And she said, "Dave and I want to know if it's okay with you if we call the baby Bryce." Naturally, I said, "What an honor. What an honor that would be for you to call him Bryce." I instantly took a breath because I wasn't sure how to do something quite so transformational. But I knew it was the right thing. I knew that the new big Bryce would love the new little Bryce. So we proceeded with going to the hospital and meeting our little grandson. It was such a joy to see him and how happy his mom and dad were. But things became complicated, and it was difficult to say goodbye to Bryce while enjoying the beauty, the miracle, and the wonder of that little baby. but I loved every minute of it. Every single minute of it. So now, little Bryce is bigger than I am. And he is my birthday buddy. So we celebrate July 9th together as birthday buddies. And I always take some time to fulfill at least a little bit of time to say how much I love my big Bryce too. I can't tell you that I understand how life works. I don't know. But I knew that day that there's something bigger at play than just me and just Bryce and just little Bryce. It's the wonder of life, the joy of life, the love I feel for big Bryce and little Bryce. And once I was able to tap into that and the gratitude that I feel for both of them, I was able to start moving past the pain and into the love that I know sustains me now, the love and gratitude I feel for them both. I hope that you are able to do the same, that your pain will be quietly and incrementally replaced with love, gratitude, and joy, the wonder of your loved one, the wonder of life, the magical and miracle of life, similar to the wonder of the butterflies. I wish you all peace and love to each and every one of you. Thank you for listening to my story.
Hi there, my name is Julie Brar. I'm a certified health coach and nutritionist, but today I'm here to speak with you about my own personal journey through grief. So in September of 2012, I lost my husband. He died of a heart attack on September 20th, and I came home and I found him. So it was quite a shock. I don't get to talk about him very often anymore, so I wanted to share a couple of pictures of him. So this is him when he used to run. His name was Kim. He was a triathlete for many years. And this is him coming out of the water. Yeah. So Kim was very active his entire life. He was a triathlete. He was quite motivated to exercise. And for someone like him, he looked really healthy and fit. Like, he was lean, he exercised, he ate properly. He did all the things that you were supposed to do. And unfortunately, when it comes to heart disease is about 80% preventable. And so sometimes if someone has a strong genetic predisposition to it, it doesn't matter so much about lifestyle necessarily. They just unfortunately don't get to live out a long life. And so in Kim's case, he was 51 years old when he passed away. Of course, for me, it was very, very traumatizing to come home and find him that way. I did call the paramedics, and to this day, very grateful for how hard they tried to resuscitate him. And of course, it was a terrible shock for his mom, his brother, his sister. And that's the thing about losing. I'm going to try and get through this without crying. But when we lose someone we love, it's a big void in our life. And especially the closer you are to that person, the harder it is. And so for me, we had been together for 11 years at that point. and we were talking about starting a family, buying a home, all of these things that we had planned and hoped for our future. And with his passing, of course, everything was cut short. And at the time, I was acting full-time, more sort of pursuing a career in the arts. And I just finished a recurring role on a TV series and was producing a play and writing a play. And so I was kind of pretty focused on being creative. But the sort of the mixed blessing of his passing is that because of what I did for work, I was actually able to take some time off and really honor my journey through grief. I did find, though, that because of what happened to him, because it was such a shock to my system, that it actually took me a lot longer to recover physically. So it took me, I would say, a good 3 to 4 months before I even came out of the state of shock. Like, I just really felt disconnected in my body. Like, I couldn't ground myself at all. I just felt really like I don't even know how to describe it, but I just felt like I wasn't even in my body. I felt like I was kind of having this out of body experience. And of course, the other thing that was very hard was that my mind just kept bouncing around from thinking about him and all of the things that we did and all the places we traveled and in the past, and then also thinking about all the things that we had planned for the future that were never going to happen. And so it was a really, really difficult time. I did, thankfully, in my time with Kim and our relationship together, I had very much also gotten on a path of yoga and meditation, and I had those kinds of tools in my toolbox. And so I didn't feel physically like I could do a yoga practice because my body was in such a bad state. But I did turn to meditation. And after about 4 months, I went to do 10 days of silent meditation. And as hard as it was to really sit and breathe through all of my thoughts, it actually allowed a lot of the emotions to come up through my body and to clear out. And I finally started to sleep more. I finally started to have like moments in my day where I felt a little bit calm. So he passed away in September, and this meditation retreat I did in January. And so there were a lot of tools that I employed to help myself move through this. I spent time with, friends that were empathetic and sympathetic and could hold space for me, because that's the other thing is when you lose someone you love, not everybody understands and can empathize and can hold space. And I found that I got very, very sensitive to people's energies. And so certain friends I spent more time with. I also spent a lot of time having baths. Something about the water just really comforted me. After I was able to finally start sleeping through the night, I did sleep a lot to just help my body to physically recover. And there were other things that I used as well. Like I talked to a therapist, I used massage therapy, I had an osteopath that I worked with as well. Kim and I lived in Vancouver for quite a few years, and we had actually just recently moved back to Toronto. And so I actually ended up going to the West Coast 3 times in the year after he passed away, and spent a lot of time with my friends out there. But I also knew wellness practitioners that I worked with quite closely. There was actually a Chinese medicine doctor that I worked with, and she helped me with took care of me in terms of having acupuncture and all of that. So I had a really open mind when it came to trying things. And really what I was trying to move through was just the physical and the emotional and the mental manifestations of grief. I would say what I have learned is that it's better to allow your feelings and your emotions to come up and let them clear out rather than trying to stuff them down. I went through a period of time in the early days where I just was trying to numb myself. So I wasn't, by no stretch of the imagination was I perfect. So I had some nights where I would go to bed with a bottle of wine and chocolate, and I was just trying to cope with what I was experiencing. And then thankfully I didn't stay in that space very long. I figured that I needed to just find a way to process through as best as I can. And I think everybody's journey is so different. I think it's so important to really honor where you're at. It depends on your relationship with the person who passed away. It depends on how they passed away. I think with Kim, the thing that was always very hard for me was that it was so sudden. And we had that day that he passed away, I was overseeing a show that I was producing. And so I left him about, I want to say about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I left to go to the theater. I took the Dundas streetcar to the theater, and we had made plans to actually, meet up at home, watch some Jon Stewart, have a bagel, like really basic couple things that I'm sure every couple has these weird little traditions. And so that was what we were going to do. And he was going to actually meet a friend of his at a hotel downtown for a drink, somebody who was visiting from out of town. And so normally we would, if we weren't together, we would have sent each other a text, we would have checked in, but we didn't check in with each other that night because I thought he was with his friend, and I had no idea that he hadn't actually even left our house. So when I came home and found him, it was quite a shock. And I think that was the hardest part, was not being able to say goodbye and having all these questions in my own mind of, what happened? Were there signs that there was something wrong with him? Could we have somehow have prevented what happened? But it actually does no good to go into these conversations of what if and what did I mess up, because it actually ends up just being a downward spiral. So thankfully I had really good friends in my life who helped me to move through those questions and just accept that what happened, and I needed to just process my feelings and my grief and find a way to get on with my life. And one of the things that I did promise myself was on the day of his funeral, I promised myself that I was going to try and find out what happened to him exactly. And that sort of desire is what eventually led me to go back to school for health coaching and for nutrition. And that's why I'm so passionate about health. That's why I do what I do for a living, because I want to help people stay healthy for as long as possible. So just going back to this whole idea of it really depends on what your relationship is with the person who passed, because for me, Kim was my primary relationship. He was my husband. And so because we were so close, that bond, when it got broken, at least in the physical realm, it was a really, really hard thing. But, every loss is different. So, it depends on what your relationship is with the person who passed, how close you were, and how they passed away. Like if someone's sick, there's a little bit more time, but it's also painful to witness someone that you love getting sicker and sicker, and eventually not the person that you remember them to be. So in terms of grief, I had my tools, and my tools were meditation and therapy and lots of bubble baths and lots of solitude. I needed to have time. I spent time with friends, but I also spent a lot of time by myself. And so I needed all of those things to help me move through. And with each passing in the first year, they talk about the year of first. So that first year, the year of first, it was very difficult because I had to just accept, birthdays, Valentine's Day, our anniversary, his birthday, Christmas, all these things. I had to accept life without him there. And then the second year, actually, in a lot of ways, was a lot harder because some of the friends that were around in my life the first few months after he passed away, they kind of disappeared. And that's what happens sometimes with relationships when you're going through grief, is not everybody sticks around, and that's okay, because in a way they helped me to kind of process through things easier, because I didn't have to have all these people to worry about and take care of and check in with. So those were my particular tools, but I think everybody's kind of has to figure out for themselves, like, what works well for them. So, my personal tool was meditation and, having solitude, but for other people, it might be better to be in the company of people. And it also depends on what you have access to. Like, I think having a therapist and being able to actually talk through my grief really, really helped. And so my hope is that everyone has that kind of access, that if they wanted to use it, they have that. And also the support groups. I personally didn't use a support group, but if you have access to a support group, it's really amazing. So, I would say that I have learned a lot of lessons through grief. And the first lesson that I really learned was that I realized how deeply I loved my husband, and having him suddenly gone just made me appreciate who he was and the relationship that we had together. And in a way, it actually made it more painful, because I realized after the fact of how much and how deeply I loved him. Over time, grief has also taught me to appreciate life, because I've realized, because I've had other people in my life pass since his passing, and I've realized that none of us are promised tomorrow. So it has really given me the motivation to be focused, and to appreciate life, and to appreciate the people in my life, and to do the things that I want to do, because Kim worked hard, but he kept putting things off. He kept, a lot of times for work, he'd have to go to Europe or New York or someplace like that. And I would say, well, why don't I come along? Why don't we just make a weekend of it? Why don't we stay a couple extra days? And he would always be in a rush to come back, because he's like, oh, I got too much work to do. I have this deadline and that deadline. And so he worked really, really hard, but I felt like he never really got to enjoy his life. And so I've learned in the years after his passing to really take time to celebrate and to enjoy every single day, to try and find joy in every single day. In fact, actually, about a year and a half, maybe actually close to 2 years ago, I started a daily gratitude practice. And I started that practice because one of the things that I noticed after Kim passed away was that I went into such a dark place after his death. There were times when I was pretty suicidal and I had to ask for help. And I found that even after, say, 5 years or 6 years after his death, I was still having a hard time. Like, I just found that when things didn't go as I expected, I just went into a dark place quickly. And so one of my therapists had suggested that I do a gratitude practice. And so a couple of years ago, I started doing exactly that. Every morning I get up, I write down 3 things that I'm grateful for and kind of what I hope will happen over the course of the day. And then at the end of the day, I write down what happened in the day that I'm grateful for. And it's such a simple practice, but there's a lot of really good science behind it, because what it has allowed my brain to do is rewire itself. So when things do go wrong, I don't get depressed, and I'm able to sort of pick myself up a lot more easily than before. And so it's been a practice that I've been using regularly for 2 years. It's definitely something that I recommend that everyone get into. And I know that initially when you're first adjusting to life without your loved one, it's very hard to do these kinds of wellness and self-care practices. Like, I had to take a little bit of a break from my meditation. It took me like a good couple of weeks before I could get back to sitting and breathing and trying to get present in my body. But anyway, that has been a really, really good tool as well. In terms of the other things that I think are really helpful it's really helpful to actually take care of yourself, even though you're not motivated to. Like, I wasn't motivated to take care of myself, but I knew that if I stayed on top of my nutrition, that it would actually be better for my body rather than trying to drink too much or overeat and all those things. Even though, like, I did have those moments at the beginning of my grief journey. And with every passing year, it's a little bit different, right? I wake up every single day. I still think of him in various ways, but I'm in a new relationship. We live together. We have a life together, and I still think of Kim every single day. I appreciate the time that we had together. It used to be when I thought of him, it was just painful and I would burst into tears. Now, when I think of him, I just celebrate the fact that I had an opportunity to be with somebody for 11 years who was so kind and generous and such a sweet, gentle soul. He really has made a big impact in my life. And he reminds me to continue to be kind and generous and to give of my energy wherever I can and to help as many people as possible. And I think in his passing, that's been one of the biggest lessons that I've learned. So everybody's journey is so, so unique. I would encourage you to just honor where you're at and trust your intuition and look for guidance, look for signs. I have so many signs in my life that still remind me of Kim and allow him to, in a way, he's always going to walk with me until my final days. So I thank you so much for listening. I hope my words have offered some kind of solace and encouragement. Thank you.
Hi everyone, welcome to the 15th annual Butterfly Release Memorial event. This year, yes, it's a little different. We are going virtual this year, as you know. This year we will be releasing 50 beautiful painted lady butterflies into the sky in honor of your loved ones who have passed. Thank you for each of you who have donated towards this amazing program, this amazing cause, to help keep our programs here at Bereaved Families of Ontario, South Central Region, free of cost for children, teens, and adults of all ages for our bereavement support programs. I'm Krista, the Executive Director of Bereaved Families of Ontario. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to be reading our native butterfly release poem, and I'd like you to join me as we go through this poem together just before we release these beautiful painted lady butterflies in memory of your loved ones. Thank you. As the Native American legend goes, if anyone desires a wish to come true, they must first capture a butterfly and whisper that wish to it. Since a butterfly can make no sound, the butterfly cannot reveal the wish to anyone, but the Great Spirit who hears and sees all. In gratitude for giving the beautiful butterfly its freedom, the Great Spirit always grants the wish. So according to legend, by making a wish and giving the butterfly its freedom, the wish will be taken to the heavens and be granted.